I'm Saraswati Kavula here in Hyderabad, and I'm talking to Amitav Pradhan, who's right now in Canada. Today, we are having a discussion regarding geoengineering because this has been bothering a whole lot of us, what is happening around us, especially with the climate matters. So, to introduce Amitav, Amitav has studied mechanical engineering from NIT Durgapur in West Bengal, in mechanical engineering, and he worked with Tata Motors, and after that he was working with Amazon. But right now he's in Canada and he's working in a field that helps the farming sector, but also essentially works with reference to climate and various matters. I would ask Amitav, can you please explain a little more about what you are involved in and how does that connect with your research into geoengineering?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Saraswati ji. So, as you mentioned, I do have a background in science, mechanical engineering, and my current role, I'm working in the agri-tech segment. So, essentially, it's a segment that creates the latest and greatest technology for the farming sector, especially for the industrial farming sector, which happens at scale, let's say over 3,000, 4,500 acres. So, we provide those technologies to help make the farming more effective.
Mhm.
In the sense, we will support you with remote sensing technologies wherein we are ingesting data from satellites like planet imagery, sentinel imagery.
Mhm.
We are using data from radar. We have our own proprietary weather stations, and we have AI and machine learning enabled systems to help farmers make decisions about their farming practices.
Okay,
So,
so
so how it
yeah.
connects to geoengineering is with this, with the technology angle, you get to see, you essentially have a front row seat to the weather patterns, essentially, because we are so deep in weather, and weather is the most important in the farming segment. And you also have an access to the latest and greatest technology in the industry. So essentially,
Mhm.
there is a lot of talk around, oh, satellites are not real, or the data they provide us, it's just fake. That is not true. I work with them on a daily basis. They are as real
Okay.
as they can, as real as the taxes that we pay. And based on that, we can arrive at meaningful conclusions.
Mhm.
And it is not all of it doesn't need to be a conspiracy theory per se. We understand that there is geoengineering is a widely accepted scientific term, and even if you do a search on ResearchNet or any
Mhm.
credible publication, you will see there are multiple different articles just on
Yeah.
geoengineering and the work that is happening across the globe. So by being virtue of the role that I'm in, I get access to that work. I'm able to synthesize that information and make sense out of it.
Right. Great. Amitav, so how did you get interested in this whole matters of geoengineering? Was it because of your work or is it your personal interest?
No, it is way before I got into this sector actually, and it was right after my mechanical engineering when I started seeing reports of people reporting they are seeing a weird white line in the sky soon after, like there's a jet plane flying over that area. And essentially, at that point, there was quite a bit of discussion on, oh, these are just contrails. Contrails meaning it's an
Mhm.
exhaust from a plane which condenses as soon as it exits
Yeah.
the nozzle, and it leaves essentially a mix of ice and carbon dioxide and water vapor in the form of ice, which dissipates almost instantaneously. And we all have
Yeah.
seen those contrails. Those are real. Don't get me wrong. Contrails are very much real,
Real.
but there are also certain type of trails that were being reported, and I'm talking about back in 2012 or
Hmm.
back in 2011, when I was
Hmm.
just like getting introduced to what lies beneath the rabbit hole of what so-called reality is, the
Yeah.
manufactured reality is.
Yeah.
And from a scientific standpoint, it made sense to me. And I saw those pictures where you were having one jet in the same, almost at the same altitude. You could tell one was having a contrail that would persist for 5 seconds, and the other one would have a persistent chemtrail which would
Hmm.
persist for hours. It will be a thick solid line. It will spread, and that kind of caught my attention, and it made me dive into, so what is happening. And in that process, I kind of I got introduced to the work of many great researchers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've been standing on the shoulder of giants, as I can say. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
research that I have is secondary research, to be honest. I've not gone out to the labs and done any of those experiments myself. Neither have
Yeah.
I been to the field and checked out for toxic levels of chemicals or whatnot. It has been a lot of synthesis of research, secondary research done primarily by others.
Okay.
But I feel I've done justice in the sense by having a scientific temperament to that and
Yeah.
kind of separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yes, absolutely. So now we get down to the subject. So even I was not aware about these chemtrails and all until recently. But of late, I have been, ever since I've been, because I'm into farming myself, I've been observing at our field, in our field area. Yesterday also, I observed one plane was going continuously. I mean, normally we are close to the airport, about 50, 60 kilometers. But then you would say one flight that would just go and leave, right? But yesterday it was just going round and round, the same flight within a span of 10 minutes, I saw. Though in earlier times, I did see these chemtrails, like what you're saying, like a thin cloud, like a long trail of cloud, which we would say, and it stays for a longer time. And then there would be a lot of crisscrossing of that, and after that, there would be a cloud. But yesterday, this one was like just one line, and after that, there was very hazy pictures. It went around a couple of times, and just 1 or 2 hours after that, then it was a very bright and beautiful sunny day, and suddenly it became very cloudy, and towards the night it was almost trying to rain. And if you remember, some time back, a couple of weeks ago also, I showed you some very strange cloud in a very, very clear sky, and you mentioned it had something to do with nanotechnology. And a day after that, we had such extreme thunderstorms. I mean, we have never heard, because thundering used to happen earlier because we've been seeing rain since our childhood. But this thundering would be like as if they're blasting a bomb somewhere. It would be happening rapidly, even without the rain. You hear the thunder and then it starts raining. So, can you explain to me what is happening here? Is this really something that we need to? Is some manipulation happening here, or is it for real? What is it?
Yeah, and I want to take a stab at that question by taking a step back and saying, like, while growing up, I read a book from Mark Twain, and it
Mm-hmm.
had this line: everyone complains about the weather, but no one does anything about it. And I write a blog on geoengineering, and I'd like to say that people who under if Mark Twain were alive today, and if he were to be aware of the level of geoengineering and weather modification happening, he would be retracting his statement. He would be amazed. Like, people are doing a lot of things about the weather, and it is publicly available. None of this is like deep dark secret. If we know how to use Google, we will find
Yeah.
all this information. So what you are describing, Saraswati, is uh, potentially, and I've not seen the pictures or the videos, but it is a potential case of chemtrail spraying. And
Okay.
for that, I mean, the question becomes what is being achieved by this spraying. So
Mm-hmm.
for that, again, we have to take a step back and understand what is geoengineering, who is doing it, and why are they doing it, and what is the mechanism of doing it. And in answering, understanding these pieces, chemtrail will fit in this big picture.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to share my
Yes,
screen
please.
and
Yeah.
we walk through this concept. So do you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yes.
All right. So essentially, geoengineering is that aspect of technocracy, and technocracy is essentially like the practice of trying to control every aspect of our life with technology. So technocrats believe that they can control weather as well, and
Mm-hmm.
weather control is actually one of the primary motives behind geoengineering. Geoengineering, as the name suggests, is engineering the geology, engineering the
Yes.
climate, engineering weather. So these days there's a lot of talk around climate change, right?
Yes.
But I think, in my opinion, we need to focus more on climate intervention and weather modification that is happening,
Yeah.
understanding that weather is not equivalent to climate. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
described to me was an unnatural cloud formation. You saw a white line in the sky, and then it
Yeah.
spread out into a thin haze and kind of covered the sky. And then there were some climate events, which might
Yeah.
mean like flash floods, hailstones, forest fires, heat. A bunch of different things can happen depending upon what is
Yes.
happening.
Yeah.
But the, what was happening here is essentially what is shown here. It
Mm-hmm.
was spraying through aeroplanes.
Yeah.
That is part of something we call global chemtrail program.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Now, what was what little bit of context here. Chemtrail was the term that was first used by U.S. Air Force, I think, 3 decades back, and it was a document by the U.S. Air Force saying, how can we use weather to be a force multiplier? Essentially, how can weather become a weapon?
Oh.
Um, and essentially, it was a military project. That's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, what is happening is it's a secret project that was started by the US Air Force, by the NATO countries, but the
Mm-hmm.
public spin for that, and they always happen in parallel. Like they will have the secret work happening and they will have a cover up for that. The
Mm-hmm.
cover up for this is global warming. There is too much sun's radiation reaching this planet and too much carbon dioxide in this planet.
Yeah.
So, in order to reduce global warming, in order to reduce the temperatures from increasing, we
Yeah.
need to have, as they call, a sunscreen on the planet.
Right.
And it would be interesting to know that Edward Teller, who was actually a founding father of the Manhattan Project that led to the kind of making of the atom bomb, which was dropped
Mm-hmm.
on Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
Yeah.
he wrote an article a few decades back. The article's title was "The Planet Needs a Sunscreen."
Oh.
And that
Mm-hmm.
was, in some sense, the starting point of the public spin on geoengineering. The
Mm-hmm.
angle was we are releasing too much carbon dioxide, and probably some of that is true. We, through some practices, there's some pollutants in the Earth's atmosphere that can create increase in temperature. We don't completely understand the mechanics of it, and we can get to it later. But here the angle is we understand completely what is happening with the climate on this planet. In order to save this planet, we will
Yeah.
need to spray something called aerosols. Aerosols meaning aerosols in the stratosphere of this planet. The atmosphere has different layers: stratosphere, troposphere, ionosphere. So
Yeah.
stratosphere is where pretty much the weather happens. So
Mm-hmm.
in the stratosphere, we are going to spray little aerosol particles, which, because of the properties that these particles will have, they will spread like a veil, like an
Mm-hmm.
umbrella, that will reflect the sun's rays back to the space and
Okay.
will prevent us from global warming. That's the public spin.
Okay.
But like the ulterior motive is way ulterior, is way nefarious. And in one word, to summarize it, it is how can we control weather and create weather events at will?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the ramifications of that is endless. Like you can use it in the stock market to like have products. And in Chicago exchange, they have weather derivatives that they are being traded on there. You can create it. You can create events like in hostile nations. You can control
Mm-hmm.
food production. Agriculture is actually a big target of
Yeah.
geoengineering.
Mm-hmm.
There's a multifaceted approach to why they are doing that. It's a huge topic. But in short, to answer your question, there is a possibility it was a chemtrail sprayed by a plane that
Yeah.
was done deliberately to create a weather event.
Yeah, I had observed this like in March this year and even last year also. I'll tell you why March is so important because that is a mango flowering season. Okay. And soon after, this I've observed continuously last year and this year also, soon after a chemtrail or, these crisscrossings that happen in the sky, we've had 1 week of fog and mist. Dew, actually, if you would look at, and dew actually destroys the mango flower. And this happened continuously twice. And like I said, some time ago, a couple of weeks ago, I think just 2 weeks ago, I think, we've had these heavy hailstorms in areas like Vikarabad, which is very close to Hyderabad. Now, Hyderabad always had hot weather. It was never a place where you would hear these, it was almost like covered in the ice cubes, this whole place. It was like as if we were living in seeing someplace in Canada or somewhere like that. It looked. So these kind of things have been happening. So that like us who really was, I was like a climate activist. I was an environmental activist, and then I began to start seeing like we believed in Katrina hurricanes and everything else. So now there is a sense of doubt that is happening. Is this really for true? And there are a whole lot of scientists who still believe in India, who believe that global warming is certainly happening, and then they don't believe in the chemtrails, or they don't think that this is all just a conspiracy theory. So, Amitav, one more question I have is this. With regard to geoengineering. What else is happening? What else is happening? What else are they actually doing? And in the first question is really a global warming happening, or some people say it's actually global cooling? What would you say?
It depends on a bit on who you ask, and I mean, again, there's a huge controversy regarding
Mhm.
this as well. I think even if there is good science behind IPCC and the mainstream on what they're trying to say, it is
Mhm.
mired in controversy. Like, I'm not sure if you remember ClimateGate. It was a
Yeah.
scandal, and James Corbett has covered it at great length. It
Mhm.
essentially gets to the point where this interplanetary, this intergovernmental bodies, they were forcing, to some extent, the scientists to force fit the data on the graph to be able to go to the public with the narrative that with carbon dioxide increase, the temperature is also increasing. In
Okay.
the if you look at the emails and there's a public data dump of that, I hope it is still there. The
Mhm.
scientists were actually raising an alarm. They were raising a red flag, saying I understand the hypothesis, I understand the theory, but the data is suggesting otherwise, right? So
Okay.
these are things we know. Like I'm not a scientist. I've not done those research myself. We are
Mhm.
basing our conclusions. We are like governments' policies, United Nations policies are based on research done by credible scientists, right? And we
Okay.
use those reports as a reference. But
Mhm.
the reference that we are using, there is considerable doubt that has been cast on those references. There is a lot of information in public domain that says the scientists themselves, they were not sure whether there is any correlation to that. In terms of is there a global warming or global cooling, um, we'll have to kind of look at the last, like a long range of data. What I'm going to say is, if we look at the weather data for the last 50 years, 30 years,
Mhm.
20 years, is just a very small fragment of a
Mhm.
trend, the
Mhm.
pattern of which needs to be looked at. We need to zoom out on that. Like if it is a sinusoidal curve, and we
Mhm.
are just looking at the phase at which it is coming down, it may seem to us that weathers are decreasing. Or if it is a sinusoidal curve and we are focusing on a narrow segment that shows the temperature is going up, we may think that they are going to go up forever. What we are missing here is it may be cyclical. And there is evidence that weather patterns are cyclical. They are less dependent on anthropogenic activities and more dependent on solar weather and sun cycles and sunspots.
Okay.
And these things are, they need to be considered. The angle I want to take to this question is the fact that mainstream science comes to the discussion saying the science is settled and everyone is agreeing on the fact that there is a global warming happening and the cause of that is carbon dioxide, which by the way is a trace gas,
Yeah.
0.3%, 0.4%, like it's less than 1% of the constitution.
Yeah.
That science is properly settled, right? So the way to answer this question, not being a scientist myself, I think there needs to be transparent debate
Yeah.
on data sources from different analysis, as opposed
Mhm.
to just the government approved, United Nations funded science bodies that just probably have their own narrative to sell.
Yeah.
So
So
I
the
clearly know, and I've seen evidence on both sides. Is my short answer to that.
Right. So the science is not yet settled about global warming. That's the final conclusion. Uh,
Yes.
just as in everything else, anybody who questions the mainstream narrative is immediately brushed aside as a conspiracy theorist. Someone who believed in this for a long time, in my growing up years, that, oh my God, there's a global warming happening. Now, this is something. So even I'm willing to take a step back and say, maybe there's something else to this. I think you have a whole lot of other slides. Is there anything that you would
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
show?
and I want to take a segue from that. So essentially, the way this information is being disseminated, Saraswati, is they are saying human interaction or human activity is causing an increase in carbon dioxide, which is causing increase in temperature. That increase in temperature is causing this weather events like unnatural clouds, hurricanes, floods, droughts, heat waves. So,
Mhm.
in order to control these events, we need to control the carbon dioxide that we are burning, and we need to reduce the carbon. That's the whole premise of the mainstream narrative of carbon. That needs to be challenged in its entirety. The reason
Okay.
being, there is ample evidence out there that even if the temperature is increasing, that is not the main driver behind these events. Uh, there is certain activities that is happening, publicly
Mhm.
funded activities, which to some extent are being disclosed, to some extent not being disclosed, that have a direct correlation to some of these
Mm.
weather events that are visible on a daily basis. And you mentioned about India. No, I've been
The
in North America
hailstorms,
for a
yes, the
while.
hailstorms, yes.
In North America, they run the weather like a laboratory. Like we see chemtrails, bunch of chemtrails everywhere. At some point, I used to be documenting them, like what is the rate per hour that I'm seeing them. But this is
Hmm.
being run like a lab, and here because of the latitude difference, the sky seems to be a little clearer. Like closer to equator, you have the tropopause, the sky seems to be a little bit further out. But
Yeah.
closer to the poles, the sky seems nearer, so you can clearly see what's happening, and the level of chemical activity is just through the roof.
So
So what I want to,
which part of the world right now? You're in Canada, I know, but which city are you?
I'm in Western on the West Coast,
Okay, right,
so
right.
pretty close
Mm.
to the pole, North Pole.
No, no, right. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So essentially, first of all, and I'm using that segue to run through like my thoughts on geoengineering. So
Hmm.
the term geoengineering was first used in 1977 by an Italian physicist, and his angle to geoengineering was he was saying that the industrialized carbon dioxide could be piped away directly to ocean depths. So again, like geoengineering and carbon, they kind of go hand in hand. The first mention of the term was in the
Yeah,
context of how we can sequester carbon and bring it
yeah.
back.
And
But
carbon
in my
sequestration
opinion,
is very big nowadays, right? Carbon
it is.
sequestration, yes, right.
It is.
Mm.
And the entire there's a carbon market, there's a voluntary carbon market, there's
Yeah, there's a
government
big
mandated
business out
markets.
of it.
Yeah, there's a whole economy that is developing on that front.
Yeah,
I work in that, but I'd like to discuss more on the technical side. Maybe we can discuss the commercial side as well on what's happening.
yeah.
But if you look at like the first example of geoengineering, I think we need to go back a little further than 77. And I would like to call
Hmm.
out the Haber-Bosch process of ammonia production, which, by the way, is what is powering almost all of the industrial ammonia, which
Yeah,
gives rise to the fertilizer. And if you
and it's
understand like how this process of ammonia creation manipulates the nitrogen cycle, like we have a nitrogen cycle ongoing where we have bacteria, bacteria, the leguminous plants and their roots, they fix nitrogen to the soil, and then it
yes,
is released and then it goes back again. So we have denitrifying bacteria, we have nitrifying bacteria, and there's a natural cycle. But with this process, we are able to kind of create an artificial cycle where, and
hmm,
then most of the food production right now is actually using nitrogen from this cycle. So anyone who
yeah,
is not eating organic food has synthetic nitrogen in their body, right? It's some way of saying it.
yeah,
um, so, and this is happening at a very large scale, very, very large
right,
scale.
right, right.
So, so essentially, when governments come and say nitrous oxide emissions need to be reduced, they are not totally off in the sense nitrous oxide is being used in much more than plenty in today's world. So, in my
Yeah.
opinion, this is the first use of geoengineering. Now,
Hmm.
this map kind of gives us an understanding of what all geoengineering events, activities have happened till 2018. I believe that is when this was made, and this was made by Jim Lee. He's a renowned researcher in the world of geoengineering. One
Hmm.
thing I want to focus here is, so if you look at this portion of the map, it says geoengineering hotspots. Any country
Okay.
that is in red is seeing the maximum amount of geoengineering, and these are the NATO countries. These are the
Right,
Western countries. These are the countries with Five Eyes and CIA and what we call the West. So there's a
right.
clear distinction. Next, we
Yeah.
see yellow. The countries have some reported activity, and India which should be the topic of our discussion, is there. And I believe right now it will be closer to green than yellow because India is actually getting pivotal on geoengineering. And green are the countries with no reported geoengineering activity, which would be mainly Africa. But this is also changing. One thing I
Right.
want to draw attention to here is one of the earliest landmark events in geoengineering actually happened in India. And this was even before like Operation Popeye, and we'll get to that. It was Project Gromade in 1967 under Indira Gandhi government when there was a huge famine in Bihar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wrote an article on this. I'm going to share that link with you. Essentially,
Yeah.
what happened was um, Lyndon Johnson, who was the erstwhile president of US, he kind of
Yeah.
arm twisted Indira Gandhi to say, essentially saying, to help you support with the famine, we are not going to give you more grains. We are
Mm-hmm.
essentially giving you the technology to create rain to
Right.
solve this famine. And that was Project Gromit when they actually seeded clouds and to some
Oh.
extent caused rain, which has all been documented. And and Pakistan had complained that they were stealing rain, India was stealing rain from them, which to some extent was true. But that was one of the landmark events. And then we have a whole lot of different events that happened in geoengineering. India still has some extent, and I can talk to that. We have, I believe, uh, Project Gromit was here, and this is my blog. You can check this out where I try to document what happened. We have Project Varuna in Karnataka in 2003. We have
We also had cloud seeding in Andhra Pradesh during 2000 because we had a continuous drought for almost 4 years or 5 years.
correct.
2005, they did cloud seeding. That was the first time I heard of cloud seeding. I never knew that this kind of thing could be done. And then we ended up actually having huge floods also after that.
Exactly. And I think that was part of Project Varuna as well that happened in Karnataka in 2003, which was actually covered by Times of India. So India
Right.
is not a stranger to geoengineering. Like these things have
Correct.
been happening for a while now, right? So
Right.
again, now take a step back and understand what is happening in geoengineering. So to your point, you saw like there was something that was being spread. Like what would happen? Why would they do it, right? So
Yeah.
this kind of shows what are some weather modification geoengineering techniques in place
Mm-hmm.
today. And this was from 2018, again from Jim Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying ionospheric heaters, which is like HARP, is an ionospheric heater. It is ionospheric antenna as well. And
Mm-hmm.
we use the term HARP a lot, and maybe sometimes out of context. Um, but HARP is very pivotal in geoengineering. We have sounding rockets, they're mainly used near the poles. Satellites, these days, a lot of satellites actually have microwaves instilled on them, so they can see through the clouds. The cloud masking can happen. So for that to happen, they cannot work in the optical range, so they have microwaves fitted. And just imagine we are doing microwave from the sky 24/7, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of such satellites with the microwave capabilities. We have
So, no,
ground-based
I'm
laser.
just seeing something here that it says that chemical release dew and ionospheric water. Just give me a minute. Just,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. My powers. So, so it says something like chemical release dew, ionospheric heater, ELF generation. So this is also happening with the satellites, is it?
Sorry, which part of the screen are you on?
I'm at
Here?
this climate view, this sounding rockets, the third part with satellites. Yeah.
Satellites, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with satellites, imagine a satellite with a microwave antenna fitted on it. Thousands of
Okay.
those. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, we understand how microwaves are not good for health, right? They work. They are very high energy.
Mm-hmm.
Microwave means millimeter level waves, and they can
Yeah.
actually cause damage to tissues. The
Right.
justification that is provided is those satellites are so far away so that they
I
can't really
see.
impact us. But we don't know. No long-term studies have really been done, and I've kind of looked at the
But
research on that.
why are the microwaves there in the satellites? For what purpose is it?
Yeah, so there is a business purpose to it. Essentially, in the world of remote sensing, and I come from that world, in the world of remote sensing, let's say you're an insurance company and you're an insurance company in Brazil or North America, and you are giving out agricultural insurance. Let's say there's
Mm-hmm.
some kind of fraud. Someone comes to you and says, I had 5,000 acres of corn and
Mm-hmm.
there was a hail event or there was some climate event and I lost my crop. So pay me out $2.5 million or whatever that number is.
Uh-huh.
Now, the adjuster in that case, they will check out the satellite imagery and they will say, okay, for whether did you plant the crop on time? Did you plant the amount of acreage that you said you're going to plant? And was
Mm-hmm.
there an activity that you're saying actually happened? This is called remote sensing that
That I am
insurance
aware of.
companies generally use. So if there is a cloud cover, then optical satellites will not be able to see through the clouds.
Right, right. Okay.
Microwave can still pass through it and can return an image which can be synthetically generated, and the insurance adjusters can look at it and say, yeah, I mean, what this guy is saying makes sense, so we are going to pay you out. And multiple different use cases, right? So you can use it to like spy on your enemy, even if there is a lot of cloud cover on the enemy basis. So different use cases for that. Essentially to see through clouds.
So, how do these satellites with microwaves work with reference to the weather modification? How does it?
They can. So they can help with chemical release. They can cause ionospheric heating. They can
Mm-hmm.
cause extreme low frequency and very low frequency generation in the ionosphere that can
Mm-hmm.
cause ionospheric currents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that part of the discussion is getting into a little bit too technical when we go into
Technical, yes,
ionosphere and
yeah, right.
electricity. What I'd like to focus on is what is happening, let's say, with rainfall and with like creating a tornado. For
Yeah.
that, they're using this number 10, which is water sprouting. Essentially, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the industries that we see have these cooling towers. They're releasing
Mm-hmm.
the water vapor. It is part of a geoengineering grid. It is not by accident. And what they have in
Oh.
here is actually a phased array of industrial installations
Mm-hmm.
which release water vapor, keeping the jet flow in mind. And let me
The jet
explain that.
flow of the chemtrails, you mean?
Jet flow of air,
Air.
like
Okay.
airflow, like we have the monsoon winds, we have the westerly winds, we have easterly winds. So if someone can plot which direction the wind is blowing, then we
Mm-hmm.
can create an impact downstream by giving some inputs upstream of the process. So what that means is, let's say I want to create a rain event in Calcutta, and I
Right.
understand that the wind is blowing from Kerala across the country all the way to West Bengal, Calcutta.
Right.
So, in order to do that, if I understand the direction the wind is blowing, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to create a cloud system first, I will start releasing water vapor throughout the body of the Indian subcontinent. So I will release water, let's say, at the tip of Kerala, then I'll release one from Pune, I'll release from Nagpur, I'll release from Orissa, and these would be in sequence. So one, two, three, four, five. By the way, by the time the fourth burst reaches point 0.5, they would all be combined together. And that's
Okay.
when it reaches the target, you actually have a combination from all these different sources. You have a huge cloud system. This part of geoengineering is not very well understood by the truth community. Truth community only understands the chemtrails because we can see that. We do not
Right.
see radar waves, so we don't
Mm-hmm.
understand radars very well. So there's some research that needs to happen on that. We don't
Mm-hmm.
understand water sprouting very well, and I recommend
So you mean to
reservoirs.
say we have all these thermal power projects across India, right? So, and of course, some nuclear plants are also there, very not that many. So, do you mean to say that they are actually synchronizing all these thermal plants and nuclear plants to release the water vapor right in the in in that sequence? Is it happening? And this can't
It
happen
is happening.
without government intervention, right?
And that's a question that I've asked myself. Is it the local government that needs to be involved, or is it like a certain intergovernmental body that decides the timing of water vapor release, like international standards that needs to be involved?
Is this
And
happening in India? That's my question. I mean,
this
I
is
know you.
happening in US for sure. This is
Okay.
happening in US, and I can say that's US and Canada. I can say that with certainty, having looked at the satellite images for a very long time, and I can prove it
Mm.
to you. I can prove
Yeah.
it through video. With
Right.
India, it is a little different, and again, like what we are showing here is only a snapshot of a very complicated mechanism of operation that is happening. There are
Mhm.
different ways to generate the water vapor. There are
Right.
different energy levels you can use. So, um, water vapor pollution through smokestacks, cooling towers. This is one of it. This is the one that is primarily being used. There is
Mm-hmm.
also orgone generators that you can use to create water vapor, and that's a
Right.
whole different topic. But
So can you briefly? I know there is a lot of stuff. We have very little time because people don't.
yeah, so if I were to
No, but
summarize this,
that
it's a
map you
three-step
showed
process.
me, that map you showed me, there's so many different things playing around, right?
Yes, this is a complicated map to understand. This is like a laundry list of all the different technologies that is being used, right?
Okay,
Which includes
right.
ionospheric heaters, and I don't want to get into ionospheric heaters because it is a really complicated topic. It's a topic for its own. I want
Yeah,
to simplify it for you and for the audience. The
right.
simplified three-step process is, let's say you want to create a weather event. You want to
Mm-hmm.
create untimely rainfall in your area so that your mango crop is impacted. if
Right,
if I wanted to do that, what steps do I need to follow? Firstly,
right.
I need to understand where is it that the location of the rain that I need to, what is the location that I need to create the rainfall. I need to
Mm-hmm.
understand the wind flow, and understanding the wind flow, I will start with step one, which is sequential in place water vapor generation.
Right.
As I discussed, like we have the phased array, and then I'll generate the water vapor so that by the time it reaches your area, it has formed into a nicely strong cloud system. Then we
Right.
have the global frequency control via radars, which is an X-rad or Doppler radars.
Okay.
This is the part where a lot of people confuse with HARP. So HARP is a pivotal pillar of geoengineering, but understand it like this: HARP-like facilities are probably 5 to 10 on this planet. That's it. The
Oh,
original harp is in Gakona, Alaska. It has been disbanded, as some people say, like it is not even in use. So anything that happens in India or in Africa or in Australia, we cannot just say, oh, it is happening from one center in Alaska, which is harp. Like it doesn't really have the capability to do that. We need to
okay.
understand what are the local deployment that is happening in our area, which can
Mm-hmm.
cause that. And local deployment of harp-like technologies is happening through NEXRAD radars, which are Doppler radars. Third
Okay.
piece is the global chemtrail program. So essentially what happens, they will spray first, and in the spraying they have things like aluminum, barium, strontium. They have
Mm-hmm.
oxides of these heavy metals, nanoparticles, oxides, salts of these heavy metals. The reason they want to spray it with this is these nanoparticles of these heavy metals are frequency activable,
Okay.
right? So if you have these like very small, tiny dust particles in the air, now if you
Mm-hmm.
send a radar frequency like boom, 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 they will dance and they can move around based on the type of signal that you're sending it to. Like essentially,
Okay.
you have a remote control from the ground. You're sending signals to dust particles in the air. You can move them around. These dust particles then combine with the water vapor that you have already generated. They create cloud condensation nuclei, CCN as we call them. For
Mm-hmm.
rainfall to happen, we need a certain amount of cloud condensation nuclei. Otherwise, the water vapor cannot condense on a nucleus. So that is
Okay.
the reason for the chemtrail and the water vapor. And next, if I want to get accuracy on where I want to target it and where I want the rainfall to happen, I
Mm-hmm.
use the array of radars. Not have. I'm not sitting in Alaska and controlling weather all over the world. I have local deployment of this weather station of weather stations or radar stations that can
Mm-hmm.
move them around and create different types of weather events. Rainfall is just a very small aspect of it.
So it could
So
be
this is the
hailstorms,
latest
it
and
could be
greatest in geoengineering.
thunderstorms, it could be hailstorm, it could be thunderstorms. Could it also be a drought? Can they create?
100%, 100%, and
Yeah,
that is also another aspect of geoengineering. It is ultimately to control the global distribution of water.
I
So
see.
to the first question you asked in the interview, why are they doing it? There are many different reasons, but the primary reason is water is the new oil. Like we all understand, we are running out of drinking water in the next like 50 to 100 years, and
Mm-hmm.
we have a large amount of water in our aquifers under the ground. We have an equivalent amount of water vapor up in the sky in the atmosphere, which we
Right,
call the atmospheric rivers. Now, the
right.
atmospheric river is flowing in a certain pattern, which creates weather effect. Now, if I have a mechanism to turn that river around, the way we have put dams on our physical rivers, they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to change the course of the rivers of water that is overhead of us in the atmosphere. That way, they
Right.
get to decide where we get rainfall and where we create drought.
Okay.
So
So they
both
are basically
both sides of the same coin.
disturbing these atmospheric rivers. this atmospheric clouds,
Yes, which will
depending
alter
on
the rainfall pattern, creating winners and losers. This is one of the primary objectives.
of the geoengineering.
Yes.
So
I know this is
we
actually a very complicated topic, and we are trying to
I know,
simplify it
I
as much as
understand.
we
I'm just
can.
trying to understand from a very common person's perspective, like for example, from a, but the factors that this is happening, right? Uh, Now coming to the point of this.
And just on that, I want to just make another comment, is the
Mhm,
fact that it is happening. Let's prove that. Like, how do we know it is happening? Is there any proof of that, right?
mhm,
So first proof, I talked about Project Grommet,
mhm.
and I'm going to share it with you here. If you see my screen, we
Right.
have example, and this is from a blog I sourced from online. So, and Madhushri Mukherjee has done good coverage of this in the past,
Mhm.
where during the famine, Lyndon Johnson actually arm twisted the Indian government to create um, a rainfall project, and that was around cloud seeding. So this was still 1967 technology, older
Mhm.
technology. They were seeding the clouds and causing rain to happen. I think they were using some artificial ionospheric heating process as well, which was not covered in this article, but they had that as well. So this is proof number one. The
Right.
second proof I want to share, and this is just to create that um, social validation that this is not the first time, neither it is too weird of a conspiracy theory.
Mhm,
Again, this is from my blog.
mhm.
um, and as you said, like, you had a blue sky and then it becomes hazy. That was exactly the title of my blog. Goodbye blue sky, here comes the chem clouds.
Right.
um, Here what we are saying is, we see these events, this is the most recent aspect of geoengineering,
Mhm.
right? But this is not the first. We had Project Cirrus, Project Cumulus, Project Skyfire, Operation Ranchand, um, Project Storm Fury, Operation Popeye, Project
Okay.
Cloverleaf. There have been
Right. I have a,
multiple.
I want to just interject here once.
Yeah,
So, were these projects, okay, I know that human beings or the scientific community has always wanted to try and control nature, right? So, does it come with that? Because we do know that we were told that the Green Revolution was necessary, blah, blah. And then we actually find out why the chemical fertilizers and things came as a fallout of the World War One and Two, right? Especially
correct.
World War One, I think. So my question is: were these whole trying to control the weather and everything? Was there really how do I a good intention behind that to begin with, or did it, like everything, many other things, start with a war perspective or a defense perspective, which we have seen in many other matters with reference to the United States defense programs?
Great question. And there may be certain aspects to it which can be of benefit. So to your point, nitrogen fertilizers coming out of Haber-Bosch process. So there's no point in complaining that the reaction was bad, right? The same
Right.
reaction, Haber-Bosch process, actually led to death of millions during the Second World War because of the
Right.
arms that came out of that process, right? But we cannot really say that technology killed people. It was the hands that used the technology. In this
Right.
case, same hands, military. If you can see here,
US
modification
Air
attempt,
Force.
Hurricane, US Air Force. We have NATO and Project Cumulus with UK government. We had Skywater, Ranch and Vietnam
They,
War Operation Popeye. So these were
okay.
primarily developed under the pretext of military intervention, military improvement, and
Mhm.
the funding, from what I gather, was approved under the pretext that this is a force multiplier. This is weaponization of the weather. Suddenly we have a new weapon, so let's put some money to build this new weapon. Um, there have been examples where these kind of technologies have been used by, let's say, a country like Saudi Arabia to create rainfall in a desert type situation.
Right.
Um, we have seen commercial ads where people are saying, pay us 100,000 euros and we will ensure that you have a rain-free wedding, so you can control the
Mhm.
weather by paying money. So there's some aspect that can work in your favor, but looking
Yeah.
at the way it is being used, and the fact that after repeated requests about chemtrails and what is happening, like the freak weather incidents, there's absolute radio silence from the government or from
Mhm.
people like Bill Gates, Ken Caldera. Um, we have David Keith. These people who are the geoengineers of the world, who is funding and running these programs, they fail to acknowledge that something like this is happening. It
Mhm.
makes me believe that there's an ulterior motive. It is not being done to progress
Right.
science, it is being done to progress control over humanity.
And then we have this very well publicized sun dimming project funded by Bill Gates, right?
Exactly. So that is exactly Project Cloverleaf, right?
Hmm.
And in Project Cloverleaf, as I mentioned, Edward Teller, he wrote this article, "The Planet Needs a Sunscreen." And
Right.
here he mentioned like the reason we need to do a chemtrail project is so
Hmm.
that uh, we can do a global dimming and reduce sunlight by 1% from reaching the Earth's surface, right?
Okay.
Now
Hmm.
that is the public twist, that there is always a public twist to what they're doing. When they did demonetization, the public twist was we want to
Yeah.
curb black money and terror financing. When they did
Right.
COVID, the public twist was, oh, the vaccine mandates are there to stop the spread of virus, which I don't know. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
even there, to, as
We, that
people say.
that's a
There's
different
always a twist
discussion.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
So
always a twist, and the twist here is, oh, we are trying to save the planet. My take on it is, tomorrow when they get caught, and they will get caught because there's so much research, there's so much activity happening in the truth community, their fallback plan is going to be, we were doing it secretly to save you from global warming. And so we are like, okay, so you are our saviors, and okay, and you are the heroes of Earth.
right,
So
right.
that's
So
kind of the
so
angle
I
that we're
have
trying to.
I have some more questions which happen. Now, what is the difference between chemtrails and HARP? I mean, there are these terms that are thrown
Yes.
around, right? And so I know what is chemtrails. I know they're spraying chemicals using
Yes.
the jets. Now, what is
Hmm.
what is HARP and what is this DARPA? What is this? And then one more
Okay.
question finally is about pole shift. I think we need to
Okay.
discuss that.
Okay, so next, to explain HARP, I will need to take you to one of my other posts, which is around radar. So HARP is the electromagnetic aspect of weather engineering. So we have water, which is a key component of geoengineering. We have
Yeah.
chemicals,
Hmm.
chemtrails, which is again a key component, and then we have the electromagnetic aspect, which is the
Hmm.
invisible component, which can give you that control.
Right.
So HARP, in this case, if I take you down. Here I discuss more about radar, but I have a section on HARP as well. So HARP is kind of a beam of energy that you can direct into that ionosphere, which is the
Hmm.
topmost section of atmosphere where we have ionized particles moving around, and you can
Hmm.
create certain phenomenon in there. You
Okay.
can create certain phenomenon in there, which means you can disturb the natural electricity flow in the ionosphere. You can create extreme ELF waves. You can create artificial ionospheric mirror.
What is ELF
Um,
waves? Sorry, what is
Extreme
ELF?
low frequency waves. Extreme low
Okay.
frequency waves, essentially ELF waves have many different usages. Some people say, and there are patents on it, and they can be used for mind control as well. Like I can broadcast a message through an ELF wave continuously, which you will not be able to hear, but it will, your subconscious will register it. Like if I constantly keep you send you a message, drink Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola, you're not hearing it, it's subliminal, but your some
Hmm.
part of your mind is capturing it, you will feel the tendency to do that. So there's some remote mind control that can happen with ELF, which is probably not the impact, not the way HARP works, but HARP
Uh-huh.
essentially can create
But
those
it can be
ELF,
used for that. It can be used for that, you
can
mean?
be used for that. HARP is a high frequency active auroral research program. It is essentially a high powered radio transmission research facility.
Hmm.
Okay, this was funded by DARPA. DARPA is the defense, kind of the defense funding program in US. This beams high frequency electromagnetic pulse in the atmosphere to create artificial ionospheric mirror within the atmosphere. So HARP is like the reverse of a radio telescope. In telescope, you are seeing an object, like you're receiving the light waves, you're receiving the electromagnetic waves. HARP is you are sending out electromagnetic waves. That is all that
Right.
HARP is.
So
Understand it
I
like this. For one
Yeah,
hard facility sitting in Alaska to control global weather is not possible.
right.
So we
But
need to
it
have
could, it
multiple.
is, right. Do we have a heart center in India also, right? Somewhere in
Yeah,
Andhra
so these are
Pradesh.
maps of heart-like facilities in India. We have one in Gadangi, Andhra Pradesh, Gadangi
Yeah,
village.
yeah.
It is exactly same as what you see in Gakona, Alaska. But
Hmm.
even this distribution of radio antennas is not enough to control the weather. We
Right.
need certainly more dense network of electromagnetic transmitters, which
Hmm.
is the radar wave, which is the radar stations. If you just see this image, you will get the feel.
Do you have a map of
This
the
is our
radar?
radar sites in US. This it is
So
possible to control weather with this.
what was that next you had another term there. Next, what was that?
Yeah, so these are the radars.
Next
So
rad.
this is a map of what all the radar stations are, and this is image of how a radar station looks like.
Oh, so
These
this
are very
next rad is actually a radar station.
yeah.
Okay. And do
Next
you have
generation radar. That's the full form of it.
next generation radar, right? So do you have and it has consumes kilowatts of power, right? So do you have any map for this next rad stations in India?
I don't have a map, but I know for a fact that India at some point back in 2018 ordered, I believe, 18 new NextRads for the
Mhm.
coastal belt of India from west to east. So they essentially want to put NextRad stations all over India. I think you can find it on the Indian Meteorological website, like where all the weather
So
stations are.
what are they going to do putting these things in the coastal area?
Um, Essentially, coastal area is at the confluence of ocean climate and land climate, and that is a very ripe area for
Hmm.
transforming the weather and conduct these geoengineering activities. So,
Oh,
if
so
you
they
spray
keep.
chemtrails,
Hmm.
and then if you create those force vortex, the electromagnetic, whatever movement you want to create,
Hmm.
and then you attach water vapor to it, then you can move that weather system across the subcontinent. I'm again explaining in very simple terms. So first
Right.
you have the frequency activable component, then you
Hmm.
have water vapor that sticks to it, then you have the remote control through radar that can
Hmm.
create give it different shape based on the pulse that is sending and can move it around. It can take our
So
weather system from east coast to west coast and move it around.
no, so my question is now this is very crucial because so much coordination is required in this whole process, right? Now, so many different departments must be involved in this because if you have
Mhm.
thermal plants, then you have the chemtrails, which is the aviation, and then you have these NEXRAD centers, which are under the meteorological department. So, if this coordination has to happen, then it should be done through some governmental intervention, right? It cannot happen on its own or by themselves. And in India, you know that most of this is still under government control. It's not under private control. So, what do you think is happening?
See, I'll tell you this. I live in British Columbia, a part of Canada, and an ex chief minister, we call them premier here, and an ex chief minister of BC, I think
Mhm.
almost a year ago, did an RTI to the government and asked the same question like, hey, these things are happening, we are concerned. How is this happening? What is the government's role? Explain it to us. He received almost 1,000 page document, and there are videos on it. I can share later, of which 60% of the document was heavily redacted. There was no information. The gist
Wow.
of that was the government is aware that something like this is happening. It's one of the most super sensitive, super confidential project that falls under military projects.
Mhm.
It has been launched under the guise of a NATO program in Canada. In India, I'm not sure what is like how the government has approved it, but
Mhm.
it has to be approved through the administration at some level. Now, understand it like this: the way they launched the COVID vaccines, right? We
Right.
had tens of thousands of doctors all over the planet saying the vaccine is safe and effective. Did they all receive a cut money? Were they all involved in the money laundering? No. They just followed what one page memo they had said from the central body that said you go out to the market and you just say the vaccine is safe and effective without even
Right.
understanding the implications of that. The same can happen with anything on this planet. If you have
Right.
radar technicians who are working and they receive a notification that says, as per United Nations law, you need to be operating the radar at a certain frequency, directed at certain wavelengths. They know
Right.
no better. They are script kiddie. They have a
Exactly.
script. They read it
No,
like a kid.
just as the script has happened with the COVID narrative and the vaccine narrative, so the same kind of script could be happening from. I mean, we are very well aware that Indian governments, successive governments, have been under control. All our policies have been directed either by the World Bank or the United Nations. Or nowadays, we see more a bigger role for WHO, but we are aware about.
I
So.
think there's a lot of awareness within India, and on that point, let me just share this with you.
Mhm,
This is an article
mhm,
that talks about aluminum poisoning. And remember, I said in that white line that you saw, there was
mhm.
aluminum, oxides of aluminum in it.
Right, right.
One way to measure that is if they're spraying us with aluminum, do we find it in our soil? Do we find it in our rainwater? The answer is yes. And this is an
Yeah.
extremely relevant study
Mhm,
where the studies focused on India, and there was a study done by Indian scientists, and I think there is merit in the Indian activist community reaching out to that scientist, where it is Jigyasu study where they looked at high mobility of aluminum in Gomati, Ganga River basin, implications
mhm.
to human. So what they found is surprising. Let me just show you this. So they found that in 2002, the aluminum content of rainwater and that after where the chemical frequency has increased is significantly different. It kind of begs the question that there is something that is adding aluminum to the level
Okay, so.
now.
Mhm,
And also let me explain this.
mhm,
This is how the seasonal distribution of aluminum is measured. You have monsoon,
mhm.
meaning rain, and that is when this red line shows the level of aluminum that is measured. During when the rainfall time, aluminum level goes to the roof and then it
Right.
comes down back again. Meaning what? Meaning someone has sprayed it on the sky. When the rains happen, it falls on
Mhm.
the ground. That is when we measure it. And after it has fallen on the ground,
Yeah.
after we have measured it, there is not much change on the ground anymore. It is still up in there in the sky. This one graph itself is enough to take these scientific bodies to the court, saying we
Right,
have measured it, we have seen a correlation not just in content but also the timing of it, and that
right.
clearly shows that we understand the mechanics of how it moves around.
So so my worry was ever since I've been observing this and this rain that has fallen like last week, I told you, uh, when they are doing these chemtrails, so when the rain falls, so could these chemicals be like, could it be something like they talk about an acid rain if there is too much of near thermal power projects, they always talk about that near these polluting industries. So now with these chemtrails, are we getting that kind of chemical rains? Because I'm very much concerned because I'm an organic farmer, I'm a natural farmer. So I'm worried about what if this rain was falling over my crop? Could this be contaminating the crops?
100%. And to add some more information to that, Monsanto, I'm sure as a farmer you know about the net name and how
Yes,
it
yes.
was one of the most evil corporations,
Yeah,
um, and now they have merged with Bayer, so that name doesn't
right.
exist. At the time, um, geoengineering and chemtrail was gaining public acceptance, or like it was coming out in the public, the information was coming out that there is aluminum in there. Monsanto actually filed a patent for aluminum resistant crops. What are the
Oh.
odds of that? You are spraying with aluminum, you
And then
want
you
the
go
crop
and
for
say
other,
that
and then you
aluminum.
say, you bring out a gene, you do genetic engineering, and you say, only my crops are going to survive. So that is one. Second piece, there's also, and I want to show you some books that are very important to read on this topic. So the
Mhm.
first one is Solar Geoengineering. I think it may be inverted. The governance of solar geoengineering. They have an entire book on how to govern the spraying. Solar geoengineering is chemtrails.
And
This
this is
book
an
is
official narrative. This is an official book.
this is from Cambridge Publications. This is you can say it is from the mouthpiece of the mainstream narrative.
Right.
Officially, there is no program. Officially it is all theory. Officially, it is all, oh, we want to have this and let's debate it. but we can see it, so we know this is happening. This is a great book to read by Weather War 101, and the links
What's
I'm going
it
to share
called?
with you. This is No Natural
Right.
Weather, and
Right.
he explains this is the most easiest way to understand what is happening, simplifying
Right.
all the complexity. There is a book by one of the culprits, David Keith,
Mm-hmm.
which says a case for climate engineering. And if you excuse me, there's also a few other books, Rising Technocracy, that talks about how technocrats plan to control through geoengineering.
Right.
And this book is very important. Imagine you are an aluminum atom.
Oh my God.
Imagine you are an aluminum atom. The reason I'm showing you this book is in this book, one of the leading researchers on aluminum on this planet, Christopher Exley, and his history is also very fascinating. How he figured out that aluminum in vaccines can cause autism, and he was fired for that. He has over 200 publications. So his
Mm-hmm.
research was the acid rain that is coming down, which is aluminum can cause acid rain. To your point, like it is falling down. It was causing fishes to die in UK, in the
Right.
United Kingdom, because
The
aluminum was
rain
entering the body
from
um,
the rains. From the rain.
from the rains. And he
Okay.
figured out that if you have a certain amount of silica,
Mm-hmm.
meaning SiOH whole 4,
Mm-hmm.
orthosilicic acid, if you have that, it's a natural antidote to aluminum poisoning. So if you ask me, today we have aluminums being spread everywhere. It's raining down on us. How do we protect ourselves from aluminum? First of all, aluminum causes autism. Aluminum causes Alzheimer's. Aluminum causes Parkinson.
Yeah,
There is no
I'm
doubt.
aware
It has
of
been
that. Yes.
published. We
Yes.
have enough evidence that I can say with confidence that we know this happens.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
this is also opportunity for me to share my slide.
So let's just
So
not.
aluminum causes all these different
Yeah,
neurotoxic
the
things like
Crohn's disease and all that.
Alzheimer's, autism, diabetes, epilepsy,
Yes.
hyperactivity, right?
Right.
His research, this book says, if you have silica water in your diet, natural silica water, not like a lab-made artificial silica water,
Mm-hmm.
this can flush out aluminum from the body. This is the only way that works. Like
Right.
they have tried many different things, silica gel, a bunch of different things.
No, my
So
question is, okay, we can drink silica water, but what would we do for, let's say, my 9-acre farm to protect it from this chemical rains? Is there anything else, anything at all that we can do?
you cannot protect your farm from by silica water because it is expensive, but you can protect your body by drinking silica water.
Right.
And a little bit of disclosure, I'm interested in this project because I try to bring this technology to India. But this
Mhm.
seems to be the only technology that can save the human body, and autistic people and people with Alzheimer's can get support with silica
So,
water. But you cannot do
right.
it at a crop basis. We don't have that much
We don't
natural
have
amount.
that, right? So this is
Yeah.
very interesting. Now we'll just move on a little bit because there are a couple of things that I would want to share. So first is nowadays, like we always had the tradition of going out and getting wet in the rain. You know, it was always a pleasure. So now after hearing all this, I think one needs to think twice before getting wet in a rain anymore. And now the another point of this whole climate debate, or whatever we are calling the geoengineering climate debate, is pole shift. Now, we've been hearing about this magnetic pole shift of the Earth. How far is that impacting the weather or the climate? Do you have any idea on this?
And my idea on that is limited. Like it's an alert that I'm going to be engaging in. It's a bit of speculation, right? It is not
Right,
based on science. Like what I've been discussing right now is hard science, but this is not hard science.
right,
Um, I mean, if you look at it on a grand planetary scale, reversal of magnetic poles is something that has been recorded in history. Like they have looked into like crystal structures, plant structures, and they have figured out. I don't understand the science well, but they have figured out that the North Pole, South Pole has actually changed direction. It has flipped multiple times in history.
right,
Around 2012, there was this Mayan calendar, and there was this whole talk about how the magnetic pole is going to flip and everything is going to come to a standstill. Clearly didn't happen. But what happened was there is objective evidence, and we can find it online, especially with companies that are engaged in satellite and GPS type services like TomTom and Garmin.
mhm,
If you understand how that technology works, it is very, very dependent on the Earth's natural magnetic field. And we
Okay.
are seeing that these companies, they need to reboot and they need to upgrade the services because they are sensing a change in the magnetic field. I don't recall the name of the news article, but I was reading a few years back that Garmin had to reset all their servers because of this change. So it is what we studied in school. The position of magnetic north and south is not where it currently is, and
Okay.
that is a published fact. It has moved. How far it has moved, it probably moves like meters per year, or kilometers per year, which is not a whole lot. But what the theory says is once it reaches a certain level of angle, then it
Hmm.
suddenly,
Suddenly flips.
that piece I don't know. That's many people talk about it. But if it flips suddenly, then there is a possibility that it will create massive weather events,
Right.
massive events like. And there are fossils of like mammoths found in Siberia, and I saw some of those fossils when I was in Alaska. Some of these animals, they died with grass that is in their stomach, which is still like fresh, or like in a condition it is not digested or not metabolized, which means they were flash frozen.
Right.
So they were having a meal and
So
suddenly the
these
temperature changed and
Siberian
everything goes.
areas were actually green areas, and they just became suddenly
Alaska as well. Yeah, and
yeah.
we have the mammoths, and we have the fossils from some of the mammoths that suggest something like this might have happened.
Right.
But again, this
So
is speculation zone, and this is not hard science.
right.
Um,
So as of now, the events which we are seeing, which are more like localized and whatever, this is happening with some intervention happening because of the geoengineering. And
yes,
also, yes, right.
yes.
And with
There is
reference
so
to,
much evidence, and on this, I just want to make one comment, Saraswati. There
yeah,
is this channel which somehow is still alive on YouTube. I don't understand how. It's called Weather War 101. That
okay,
one channel has documented satellite imagery, radar imagery, at least for the last 2 decades, 2.5 decades. They have
right,
gone through each and every weather incident in North America, broken it down step by step as to how this happened, which stations were involved, which radar was beaming at that level of granularity. So I
right.
recommend your viewers to visit that channel, download their videos, try to understand what is happening. That is the most interesting resource on this topic in current state.
Right, that's great. We have covered quite a bit. Now, my question again, one last question I would want to ask is with reference to these tsunamis and earthquakes, this what we have seen in Turkey. There are some people who say that this is happening naturally at the Earth's crust underground. There are some shifts happening, and that's the reason why these earthquakes and tsunamis are going to, and much bigger ones are expected. Now, is there then there is this other set of people who believe that no, this is also part of geoengineering. Do you think that engineering has so much power to create these massive earthquakes or massive tsunamis?
Interesting, and again, it's a speculation alert. I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to
Right,
give you facts.
right,
If you look at HARP,
right.
we discuss artificial ionospheric mirror, and let me just pull up that slide for 1 second so I can explain to some extent what I'm trying to say here. So, what is an artificial ionospheric mirror? It is essentially you have a radar, and then ionosphere can be a kind of a mirror. If you send a wave, it can reflect back. Now,
Right,
if you can send enough amount of energy to the mirror, you can change its shape. Now, suddenly from US, I have it facing towards India. I can send a large amount of energy. It will reflect, it will hit this mirror and goes to a specific point
right,
without me having to send a plane or like an army, or I can just send a huge amount of energy. This is called directed energy weapons. So if
right,
someone understanding of those fault lines on where like there are potential earthquake activities that can happen, and those fault lines are very vulnerable. If you send a certain amount of energy, you can move them as opposed to a solid line, right? So if you
right.
understand the fault lines, theoretically it is possible.
Okay,
Whether it has been happening or not, I don't know. I've seen reports where there certain very weird green light was seen in the sky before the Mexico earthquake, before um, the earthquake in Turkey and before a couple of other earthquakes seems to be a similarity where there's a certain green light that is being seen in the sky, and after that, these kind of activities are happening. There may be a commonality. We don't know. What we know for sure is these kind of technologies exist. They're being funded by our money. There is absolutely zero mention of that in mainstream media. And anyone who tries to bring these facts to the front of the people with proper scientific backing, they're being branded a conspiracy theories and they're just shoved to the side without an opportunity to engage in meaningful debate. And that is a piece we need to stay away from.
Right. Thanks so much, Amitav. I know there's more to this whole thing, but I know people also have very short time to sit and watch. But it has been great talking to you. And I'm sure we're going to talk again because I know you have been researching on many other subjects. Very soon we will have a discussion on the CBDC and other matters. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming today.
Thanks, Saraswati. One comment I want to make is this has been kind of the central focus of my research. And again, it is a convoluted topic. There's a lot of things going on. It may be a little bit all over the place. We need to have multiple sessions just to understand what is geoengineering. But just as a summary, as a wrap, what I'd like to leave this call with is, yes, there is evidence that these things are happening. There is evidence that the governments are involved, and there is impeccable evidence, evidence that we can go to court with, that they are toxifying the environment in which we live. And we need more people to come up. We need more people to start doing rainwater samples, soil sample studies to be able to corroborate this evidence moving forward. And if there are need for any more sessions for me to drill the message any deeper, I'll be very happy to do so.
Yeah, we will surely take it up. Maybe we'll take, because this was like an overall view, because there's been so much, confusion going on these matters. So this gives like a whole picture, but maybe we can do separate ones on understanding separate matters, like how this, what you mentioned about chemtrails, or maybe DARPA, what is HARP, and maybe their history. And thanks a lot.
And for the audience that is really curious, we can actually have like a whole half an hour, 1 hour sessions on each of these topics alone. They in themselves are so deep. HARP is a topic that even I don't understand very well. Like we have to really go into the depths of engineering to understand what HARP is doing.
Right. So thank you so much, Amitav. And I'm very surprised and amazed that being in the professional field, you have come out and spoken so openly, because not many people come out. I hope this is all right for you.
That's not a problem. What I have said is are things that I can prove. So I've not said, and wherever I've said something that I cannot prove, I've mentioned it's a speculation alert.
Right. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you again.
Take care.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you.